Welcome to the first video in this series about the marble roller game. What we'll do first here is take a little look around and see what we've got. When you open up Unity, this is what you'll be faced with here. And we can sort of see the hierarchy, which is going to be the objects in our game. At the moment, we have one scene called sample scene, and we have our main camera and our directional light. We'll talk about those later on. Down here along the bottom, we've got our project window, which has all our assets and anything that we've brought into the game. Currently, our only asset is really our scene, and we'll be putting some more in there very soon. And on the far right side is our inspector window. If we click on, say, this camera, we'll be able to see some of the properties that are involved in this, such as its transform, and the camera, and the audio listener, which makes up the camera. If you click on the light, you can see that there are different properties, although the transform one is the same. Now, to begin our game, let us just change the scene name, because sample scene is probably not the best name, so let's just do that right away. I think I'm just going to call this game. Later on, you might choose to change your name, or have more than one scene, but for the moment, we'll just start with a scene. Let us add something into the game. So I'm going to come up to game object. So anything that we sort of add that you can sort of physically see in our game is going to be a game object. We're going to go down to 3D object and we'll add a sphere. And that sphere is going to be our marble. So let's give it that name. You can see here that it's highlighted as a sphere. I'm going to call it marble. And let's just talk about its placement. In the transform here, there are three properties: position, rotation, and scale. And you can see here we've got X, Y, and Z for all three. At the moment, it is centered in our world. 0, 0, 0 represents 0 on the X, as you can see here, 0 on the Z. So X and Z represent that 2D, sort of the flat plane, and Y is your vertical or height. And so, like I said, this is centered right in the middle of your world. All right, rotation for a sphere, it won't really matter here, but you can play with the rotation and then also the scale. Now, let's put a ground in to give us a little bit more idea of what we're looking at here. So to put that ground in, I'm going to go to Game Object, and under Game Object, I'm going to go to 3D Objects, and I'm going to find the plane. Now, the plane is actually sort of a 2D object. It really only has the scale on the X and the Z, and you can give you sort of a feeling here for its position. I'm going to increase that size. I'm going to go up to 2 on those, and you can see that we've just sort of doubled that area. Well, I guess we've quadrupled the area. We've doubled both of the X and the Z axes. Our ball now, our sphere, well, actually, before we do that, let's just change that name. Now, we could double click here. Usually we can change it. That's interesting. Oh, there we go. I can double click or triple click on that, and I can change it there. However, just to show you, over here in the inspector, you can also rename it, and I'll call that ground. Now, if I zoom in, so I'm using the middle mouse button, it will zoom in on the center of that ground. If I click the marble, it zooms in on the marble as well. Okay, and what I can see is that that marble is now a little bit below the surface. It's kind of intersected by that ground. And that's because they all have the same position. And so what I want to do is just lift that marble just a little bit up. The marble has a diameter of 1 meter, or 1 unity unit. So I'm going to pop that up to 0.5, and that will just lift it so that it's sitting on the surface. Now I can move my window around a little bit. If I hold the middle mouse button down, I can kind of pan the camera left and right, up and down, and you can sort of get a feel for that. If I hold the right mouse button down, then I can kind of rotate, and so you can get sort of a feel for rotating, and then I can zoom in and zoom, well, basically zoom in and zoom out using that middle mouse button there. Okay, you can also use the arrow keys if you're interested to move around. So at the moment I'm just using the left and right arrows and then the forward and back arrows, and that works as well. So some people like to sort of glide around that way. Depends on what you feel. I just usually, usually use the mouse. Now, if you get really far away from something and you have no idea where your world has gone and you're looking around, if you click on one of these objects, put your mouse in the middle here and press the F key, it will focus or frame that object. So then you'll be able to get back to where you want it to be. All right, so we're pretty good here. Let us actually add some materials. So I'm going to go back down to my assets folder down here, and we can see this one says scenes. I'm going to right click and actually create a new folder just to keep things organized. And I'm going to click folder there, and this will be my materials. Now this game is going to be relatively simple without too many materials, without too many assets, but it's always a good idea to keep things organized. Now inside the materials folder, there's nothing, but let us add a material. So to do that, I would just simply right click and create, and then somewhere down here, there it is the material. And so if you click on material, it opens up sort of this shader here, and you can go ahead and make the material. Again, a good idea to name it. So I'm going to call it the marble color. Doesn't really matter. I mean, you can just give it a name, whatever color you want. I'm going to set this to a yellow color, and you can see there's sort of a color wheel, and I'm not particularly concerned about what color it is, just some reasonable yellow color. Okay, so it's looking pretty good. You can, if you want to make it pure yellow, you can crank up the RG and no B, and that's the opacity there. We'll keep that as that, and you can see there's your hexadecimal color. But we just made a yellow. You can play around with the metallic and the smoothness. Feel free to see what those do, but you can get an idea of what our marble is going to look like down here. Now at the moment, we've just created the shader. Our marble hasn't changed colors, so I'm just going to simply take that material and then drag it onto the ball. And you can see the ground does it as well. I can drag it onto any object and apply that material. When I go back to the marble here, you'll see that that material has been added into the properties here. Okay. I'll just sort of mention at the moment too, you can see obviously beyond the transform, that marble has what's called a mesh renderer. The mesh renderer is what allows sort of the camera to sort of see that object, okay? And then the second thing is a sphere collider, which will be important when we talk about moving this ball. We don't want it to fall through the ground and so on. So that sphere collider allows for collisions and sort of edge detection to occur. Let's add one more material before we're done this video, and we'll do something to the ground. Again, I'm not partial as to what color you choose here. So if you want to do a different color, that's fine. So right click, come down to create and then material. And I'm going to call this the ground. But again, up to you. And I will make this a green color. So again, you can play with this or use your RGB sliders here. So green is what? Just all green. There's a nice strong green for you. Again, feel free to change up the color there. And again, just apply it by dragging it on. All right, so that's good for the start. We have our ground, we have our marble, and we've given them colors, we've given them names. They exist in our world. We learned that we could manipulate them by moving them with these values. I will also mention here that you can move them using your arrows here. So you can choose the direction you want it to move. And you can see it moving along the X or the Z or the Y. You can also grab right in the center and you have sort of a free form location. But if you do want a specific location like we did here, just a second, it's putting into Japanese. There we go. Okay, that's better. If you want a specific location, you can choose, right, by typing those in. Yeah, so I think that's good for the moment. We'll start moving this marble around in the next video.